So here we go, my lovely friends. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of our spiritual talk show, Let's Talk Spirit, with your show host, Zsuzsanna Medium, with myself, Zsuzsanna Medium. Thank you very much for joining again. If you are new to this channel, a very special, warm welcome extended to you. So I hope you will enjoy these types of conversations. And otherwise, if you have been here for some time, we are always up to something very fascinating to discuss, to discover, to ponder and wonder about everything related to our spiritual being, our soul's journey, our healing, and then everything what I have not even mentioned here. So today I have a very special friend here with me, Paul. So Paul, how are you?
I'm really good, Zsuzsanna. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. I tell you what, we've been laughing at the beginning or before we started this conversation because we wanted to start this podcast, a series of talks for quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And then finally, now we are sat down, we've got our coffees, we've got everything here, nicely getting ready. And I'm going to tell you, my lovely listener, in these conversations, when I'm having a chat with Paul, we never design anything. Every time when we're having conversations, there's a lot coming up in all different angles, his side of the points of views and my side of the conversations. And then we always say that, oh, that's very interesting. Why didn't we record this? So here we go.
So many times you said, oh, why didn't we record that?
Absolutely, yeah. So here we go. So we'll go. Now, so how do I know you? Where did we meet?
Well, I think it's probably 8 years ago now, isn't it? So when I was working as a hypnotherapist and a holistic life coach, and down High Wycombe way, wasn't it?
Yes. But a long time ago, my goodness. 8 years. Yes. So you were working as a hypnotherapist and a life coach, and that was actually the time when I was specifically interested in past life regression.
Yes.
That was for me the first time, past life regression.
Yeah.
And then lots of things have changed since then.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the focus for me shifted away from hypnotherapy and more into the energy healing and the real recognition of spirit at work in every moment of life, and seeing life as a dynamic play of energy rather than individuals at work. So less of a relationship kind of thing, far more as a pure experience, if you like. I don't like that word pure very much, but just an experience of energy through life, and seeing individuals as reflections of energy, patterns of energy, different frequencies, and how we inhabit certain frequencies as an individual, you could say, but also the whole extent, the whole range of cosmic energy, of unity consciousness, of mass consciousness, however we want to look at it. And I know from our discussions over the last and it has been 8 years, we've kind of explored so many different things.
Absolutely, yeah. There and back and all different dimensions, and there and back, and questioning each other's conversations or ourselves.
Yeah.
And then our conversations have been always like for an hour or 2 or 3.
There's been occasions, where we've kind of gone, look, not time for a long chat today, and then 4 hours later, it's like, obviously we had time.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's a far cry from kind of the days of hypnotherapy and looking at past life. Even then, there was kind of a hint that, is there actually multiple lives? Are they just not multiple stories? And that we inhabit a certain frequency, and you could say, at some level, DNA carries the story of the ancestors and of different aspects of the personality and archetypes, and each of us can have a wonderful story about that, a wonderful personal what would be the right word? Experience. Yeah, a really wonderful personal experience of imagination and fantasy, and yet it feels really real, very, very real.
You mentioned one word here, the imagination,
Mm.
because I just directly go into the middle of the conversation, because I know people, we live in a time when people are really drawn to discovering themselves. So one way, maybe, are you okay if we talk about the past life thing, the past life conversation?
Yeah,
Because I know
do
a
it,
lot of people are asking, especially if they are looking for hypnotherapists and past life regression,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people are asking, what is happening in their own lives, and then they choose this methodology or modes of healing or discoveries. And then, you see, if I go directly with this, a lot of people can be really attached to the stories, attached to the outcomes, and attached to even the therapist, and then they might get lost in their own stories. And so that is one theme here. The other one is, you mentioned imagination. So how can we, if I talk about the human level, what can we say to people who are really interested right now in their lives, like how I was 8 years ago?
I think the greatest distinction to really perceive is that whatever your senses are telling you right now, so our direct experience of this room, of the computer, of the coffee, of the the drizzle outside, but the light coming through, all of those things are what we would consider to be our direct reality right now. And we can converse, we can relate to them, we can talk about the weather. All those things are a description of reality as it stands. When we bring something in from the esoteric or the metaphysical realm, we're now moving into imagination and fantasy. So if we start talking about the past and past life regression, that's coming from a place of potentiality and a place of story. It's not reality. We're bringing it into reality, but as a story, because our senses aren't directly involved with that story. We could say that emotion is evoked because of those stories, for sure. So that makes the stories feel real. But the difference being that our five senses of touch, taste, smell, sight and sound, they give us what we believe is reality. And the imagination and thoughts and the future, ideas of the future, commentaries about the past, that's imagination. That's the potentiality for new experience being expressed. And then, if you like, being, depending on where the emotion goes with that, whether we manifest that as our next part of reality, where the senses are then involved with it directly. So we have proof that our imagination can be made real.
But then I feel I need to put my point across here, because
as always,
I still feel like the past life regression is real. It's real because I'm sensing it. I am experiencing it. So it's not my imagination.
Okay. So for instance, when I
want to feel it real.
I
want to be in that time.
But how do you sense it without it coming from the mind first? So for instance, for my own past life regression, I simply closed my eyes one moment when I was kind of relaxed and sitting quietly on my own, and I just said, okay, so what are the most important past lives that are still impacting me today? And I was given 3 very quick glimpses of one was of like a Japanese shogun, who was stood on a pile of bodies. So in that one, I'd slaughtered thousands and thousands. So that was guilt. I was seeing the archetype of guilt through that past life image. Another was of where I was a small child, I believe a small boy, crippled. So then everything that I saw was from the ground up. But I knew that I wasn't an adult. I was certainly probably 7 or 8 years old. So that sudden image of that past life was showing me of the pain and the difficulty and how the experience of being downtrodden almost, of being under somebody else's foot, and absolute penury, real poverty. So that showed me another archetype that I was still working on. And then the final one, which was the most profound, and I did go on I did go and sit with a trance medium on this one and ask the question. because I'd had a pain in my spine, in my
interesting. You
shoulder.
come back to a medium, a transmitter.
Well, it was the first
when you
time
are looking for your answer.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd ever been to one as well, because it wasn't really, as you know, it wasn't really my thing. But I felt guided to go, and so for 25 years I'd had this pain in my spine that was, it felt neuropathic, so it felt like it was just a nerve issue, and I could manipulate my neck to help relieve it, but in periods where it was really bad I couldn't. So there would be this consistent or persistent, pain, like toothache in the spine. And so this is why I would look at it as imagination in the truest sense, because my imagination had said, well, this is something to do with the death of Christ. And it was like, what? So I went along to this medium. Now, I was carrying clearly the thought form of the death of Christ and my pain in my spine with me when I went to visit the trance medium. Now, she channeled this frequency of the teacher of Confucius. So it was a never embodied energy form. So the teacher had never actually been in human form, but was Confucius's teacher. So this lovely little lady suddenly turned into kind of a Chinese man. And you know, she says, oh, someone here got a question for me? And I was like, yeah, I have. And as she was answering my question, I said, what is the nature of this pain, the origin? As I was asking that question, and she was answering, as she was speaking the words, I was feeling the words and hearing them in my own head immediately. So there was no delay. It was as if there was just that one voice that was in my head and being heard at the same time. And she said, oh, this is 2 millennia old. You have something to do with the death of Christ. And I was like,
yes.
What?
Yes.
But as she said it, it was also known that was how in my imagination, if you like, how I was perceiving it. That was my way of dealing with it. And it's what made sense to me. How my imagination made sense of it. Did it feel real? Yes, it did. Was it real? Well, yes, in my imagination. And did my imagination affect my my body in any way? You know, this mind-body connection or spirit mind-body connection? Then yes, because it evoked certain emotions, which is, you know, as we know, energy in motion. So the body had an experience linked to the perception of what both the medium was saying to me and what I was directly intuiting myself. So in that sense, it was real because my senses had a very real relationship to that moment, to that imagination. But can we prove that to anybody else? You know, in this room right now, we can share sensory perception. We can say, I can see the light coming through the window, and we can agree on that. And we can feel the sense of our bodies in the chairs and the warmth of the coffee, you know, the taste and things like that. We can share those. And so we can say, well, that's very much what this reality is then. It's a sensory feeling experience. But I'd like to draw the line at that and then say, now when we go into the thinking experience, that's where there's a change. Because thinking it's almost like, and I've written about this actually, it's almost like thinking is beamed into the brain. It's like we're receivers for thoughts rather than the generators of it. And it may be that our feeling sensory part of us is transmitting what it wants from the heart, for instance. And then that comes back in the form of different frequencies. And the brain is used to translating those frequencies into a voice that we know to be familiar at ours in our own mind. And then it comes back as thoughts. And we think that we're the ones thinking. We may be the progenitor of the thought, because of the desire to actually want something in our lives, which is transmitted through the heart and through our feeling senses. And then that comes back as part of our wider kind of selves through the ether as a frequency of sorts that we then, we encode or decode. So we're encoding it for ourselves, getting an answer from the wider self or the impersonal self back into the mind as thought. but how do we express thought as a direct experience and share it with somebody else? Because that is where I would say, well, we can't do that. Thought, it would be very, very personal. And you can share comments, you can share description, and people can believe in that, and then they can join with that, and you can manifest and change the world through that, for sure.
So how do you explain that, for instance, like two people are talking? I think it happened before when we were talking about something, and then just suddenly both of us felt that we are in the Roman times. And then you said something, and then we were just talking, and then you said something, and I said, oh, like 2 seconds ago, that was my sensation, like as if I was back in time. So how do you explain from your side of the story? How do you explain that? Because from my end, as a spiritual medium, I can explain it differently. And that's my belief. That's my way. But then, how do you explain when two people happen in the physical reality? They are feeling the same. They've got the same energy, they've got the same knowledge coming to them, and then they're filtering through their consciousness, their awareness.
Well, I think you've hit the word there, filtering. So each, what we consider to be each human body is itself a filter of which is made up of the experiences not only of this lifetime, we could say, but of other lifetimes and all the environments within which that it's experienced. And I could even say that DNA, being an incredible storehouse of information, that is the Akasha, that we would go to our DNA for the Akashic record, and that at certain levels of consciousness you can perceive that directly. So the information that we seek is actually within. Not only is it within in terms of going within meditatively or in the sense of trance, but the story that we get, so for a trance medium necessarily, that all the messages could already be held in the DNA within that body.
I agree with this.
And so when we resonate at a very, very similar and very narrow frequency, then we're capable then of reading the DNA simultaneously. So you could, for instance, it's a little bit like, is the tail wagging the dog or is the dog wagging the tail? Do you suddenly have a moment where you perceive the sense of being in Roman times, and then the moment that you perceive that, you're actually transmitting that to another person, and they then perceive it? Or is it the other way around? Or do you both get it at once?
I feel that when two people are in physically in the same room, like how we are talking now, and then and on the big scale of consciousness, if that conversation, that energy meant to be felt, the frequency to be felt, then that is being felt by the two individuals. And then if they have the awareness to acknowledge it, then they are talking about that. They acknowledge it, and this is how. But I feel that from the big scale of things, that is one of the things when we don't have words for that,
Yes.
And then from that space, or in that space, because we are part of that, that knowledge needs to be understood and experienced in the very moment by those two people, so that they can bring it forward in conversations, in words, so they can acknowledge it. And then when they are acknowledging it, somehow like a butterfly effect, they are shifting the consciousness, not just for each other, but then for other people. Energy.
I mean, I
That's
don't.
how I imagine that.
Yeah, I don't see anything as being separate. So, thoughts being had, emotions being expressed, sensing happening. Those things are never actually happening to an individual. They're always happening to the whole of consciousness. Which means the whole of consciousness is directly affected by it. It's the subtleties or the nuances, the very fine and intimate experiences that aren't necessarily experienced as well as they could be, because of the filters of belief and trauma and story and indoctrination. Even words. No word has intrinsic value in its own right. It rests on other words to give it meaning. And words come out of thoughts, and so our thoughts have no meaning of their own right and no intrinsic value in their own. Our senses, They do, because those are things that we know. We put a hand in the fire, it gets burnt. There's something that we know that's beneficial to us. And our thoughts, particularly the ones that are more unconscious and that lead us to project desires into the world so that we can see them, those themselves are fantasies and imagination. And they're almost like an overlay to reality, because our sensing is happening directly right now. I mean, as Eckhart Tolle, says, the power of now. I mean, even now doesn't exist. Even that word can't describe this. Even the word this can't describe this. I mean, there's no way the Tao that can be spoken of isn't the Tao. There's no way we can actually talk about reality, but we can say that our actual experience is felt, as opposed to thought about. The more thinking we do, the less direct experiencing of the moment that we have.
I tell you what, as I'm listening to you, I feel we are dipping into about 3 or 4 different topics of the lakes or the oceans or different things. I'm still going back, if you are okay. I'm okay with that. I'm still going back to the past life conversation, because then what can you say to those who are really hanging on to that reality that they need to go into hypnotherapy or past life regression to understand their own lives? And then it's so very easy to get lost in that reality, in that way of being.
I would say explore everything until it no longer serves you, and you'll know. If you're listening to your intuition, you'll know. There was a point when I mean, it was several months where we were doing the regular sessions of past life. And I remember that there was always a similar theme that came up. And I know there was a certain point at which it felt like, how many more times can we visit that theme?
Yes.
And then at some point, obviously, I know that you had a shift, energetically you had a shift, and that no longer became relevant. So intuitively, you'd reach the point where it's like, right, okay, I get that message. I understand what's being shown now. And maybe that isn't, for a lot of people, it's not always understood immediately. There's an integration or an embodiment process where it becomes so obvious at some level that there's no seeking for it anymore. And we'll move on to other seeking methods, normally more expansive methods. And we have more expansive kind of spiritual states.
Can I just pause you here? Because it feels like we are going. We can come back for this if you remember where we stopped this point. I'm clutching it. I'm still with the past life regression people, because there is I feel like there are, in that sense, invented commerce, 2 realities. One of them is, let's say, the 200, 300, 500 years ago, that point of reference, and then we are experiencing ourselves in that time, and then what we learned through that time, through that life. So that is one thing to ponder about when we come back to this reality. And then the other one is really what we are bringing forward, and then how that lifetime resonates with the current lifetime, and then the things we did not figure out back then or learned, then how we are applying that knowledge or even making changes. So there are 2 things here, I feel like there are people who really want to get lost in the reality of doing this time travel thing, because it's yummy, because it's real. Then they might not take the actual learning. They could say, yes, I have, this is what I understood from that session. I want to have another one because I want to go back over there. But then your soul might be taking you somewhere else. So I feel like, we live in a time when people need to be, I'm not saying mindful. I don't like using the word mindful. I'm not even careful. But then just acknowledge how much is really serving you, and then how much you might be keeping yourself in the same pattern.
Yeah, I think really there's 2 words that you're pointing to for me. One is evolution, and then the other one is consciousness. So we can put those 2 together and say, well, what we're actually talking about is the evolution of consciousness. Or we can say, well, what we're seeing there is that if you're conscious to that wisdom that you're seeing in your past life journey, or in any aspect of whatever work you're doing, whether it's soul retrieval, shamanic work, energy work, whatever, if you're conscious to the messages and the data that you're being given, then you are clearly evolving in your awareness of things. So your own, there isn't such a thing really as personal consciousness. I mean, that's a story. But in that sense, consciousness is reflecting on its own development and becoming more aware of itself. And whether someone gets what we would consider to be stuck in that loop, it's still serving consciousness. So the individual's needs, you could say, aren't actually really seriously considered by consciousness as a whole. That, you know, the infinite, eternal, intelligent and loving presence of all things in inverted commas, isn't really interested in individuals, which sounds, you know, quite problematic. But that's where we get lost. As human beings, we get lost in our individual world, thinking that people are making judgments about us, and we look at people and we judge them through our belief systems. If we can take that personal aspect out, even just for a few moments, and just relax in the impersonal nature and recognize that this is not a linear experience. It's, if anything, it's cyclical. There are, not only are there cycles of evolution, but there are cycles of our consciousness. So we may be in a very low vibratory cycle, but it's not a line, it is a spiral, and we can come up that spiral and kind of vibrate at a higher frequency, if we like, and then we can come back down, and we will spend time kind of going up and down the spirals, feeling as if we're getting somewhere, then feeling as if we're not getting somewhere, then until we see that actually we're aware of the spiral. We're aware of the movement of consciousness, the movement of supposed contracted and expanded experience. We're aware of that first. So the very primary, or the very first experience is of experience itself. And then we get lost in the content of it.
So, you know, I'm following you because we've been having the conversations for now so many years. But then I'm thinking of our lovely listener here. So I know people want to have the practical tips.
Okay.
So, you know, we started the conversation how much people might be drawn to or engage or still engaging. That is what I need to do. Fair enough. The past life regression and hypnotherapy. And so what practical tips can we give to people who feel that maybe that type of modality is not really working for me? Maybe I have explored everything what I needed to, and then now what?
So I would point to the direct experience of the senses. So, and we've done this, I know, before, where if you put your hand on a table and then you lose the concept, or if you can give up for a moment the concept of hand and table, then really feel into what's happening. And you'll get more of a raw experience rather than a conceptual one, because the concept of hand, the concept of table, again, words have no meaning unless we give it. So if we take that meaning away, then you've just got a sensing. Excuse me. What we're looking for then in that sensing is, where is the beginning and the end? What are the limits to the sensing? What are the boundaries? What are the restrictions? And you'll begin to realize, the more that you do this, and it doesn't take long, that the limits are only in the mind. The limits are placed on that experience by the mind. And the more that you practice, this is just one modality, the more that you practice that and witness it for yourself, the experience changes from one of conceptual experience, as in a hand on a table, touching, to one of a direct experience, which is just feeling.
So you mean... So what are two things I'm doing. One of them is I'm putting my hand, just to recap, putting my hand on the table. And then first I am using my sense, like my visual sense, that I'm noticing my hand is there. I'm still at the hand, my hand is there, and my hand is on the table. And then from that point I'm even looking at what is maybe the colors, or how my hand is feeling. I'm feeling cold and hot. So using my senses to acknowledge the actual experience.
Yes, and then...
So that's the first step.
Yeah, and then drop the concept of seeing, and drop the concept of hot and cold.
So how do I do that?
Just by letting go. It's just give them up for a moment. Just recognize.
So it's like practically I can ask, okay, so if I want to let go, even if I don't know how I'm letting go, but I could just say that, oh, actually, I'm curious what else is there.
I'm curious as to what's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Curious to the experience and not the content of experience. We're fixated on the content of experience, and the content shows us a hand on a table that is hot, that is cold. There's differences between the sensing on the palm and on the top of the hand, the blood flow, all of those things, the sight of it, the smell of it even, So for a moment, give up the idea that we need to know the content of experience, and then look to the texture or the quality of the experience itself. And then you begin to see that there's another quality that's already present before the mind tells you otherwise.
So if somebody is still thinking with their minds,
they're going to see a hand.
How would they word it? What would it sound like to them when they are at that stage?
Any thought at all that's trying to describe the feeling is the mind.
Yes. So like how I started.
So
stage one.
Yeah. So anything.
Objectively,
And then at any point, what will happen is that the deeper the experience, the deeper the thoughts will come up. So more subconscious or more unconscious thinking. So we're really getting into kind of areas of identity and the archetypes.
Interesting you say this, because now as I'm listening to you, I've probably done this exercise a million times, but then as if I'm looking at my left hand, and I'm, as I'm listening to you, I'm present to that, to the identity, just the identity. I was thinking of, how come I always had the hand here, but I never put my hand up? Or I tend to keep my hand behind my back.
Yeah.
Or as a child in the school, and then I would use the other hand because I'm right-handed. But then I'm and even the emotion. I'm feeling the emotion. How come I wasted so much? The opportunities, so many opportunities by not putting up this hand or putting both hands up, or
so that little experience there actually put that gave you something, a flavor of memory or of experience of the past that is still relevant for you today.
Yes. Yeah, because I'm acknowledging it.
Yeah,
yes.
And it's like, okay, so you've acknowledged it. Now, if you follow that thread long enough, you can end up in an area where imagination is telling you that you're in a different lifetime. Because what we're saying is we can access anything through the DNA if we accept, or we just use for a moment, the concept that DNA is the Akashic record. So that means that you can access any of these streams they will only come up to you if they're relevant for your experience.
So for instance, I could ask, if I'm at that stage now, like stage 2 or 3, if I want to label it that way, but I can ask my hand, okay, so what else do I need to know about you? Or when was another time when you were important for me? Or when I neglected you?
Yes, yeah. And you can switch over to your other hand.
It's interesting because right now as I'm asking, I'm feeling, but I was still good at playing the piano because I'm a pianist. Yeah. But even if I didn't put my hand up, the left one, so I have the guilt and the emotion and everything, and I could get lost in my memories. Oh my dear, yes. So, but then at the same time, I'm balancing it out by asking the question, okay, but then what else do I need to know you?
Yeah.
And I'm acknowledging my left hand, even if you are my left hand, not my leading hand, my right, but even if you are my left hand, you were pretty good at playing the piano. And actually,
and so, I mean, again, words.
Made it work that way.
I'm kind of playing on the words now from the hypnotherapy kind of place, which is, if it's your left hand, was it left behind? Did you leave it somewhere? Is this left hand lifting? And can your left hand actually be the right hand to use? And is your right hand always the right choice? So we can words at the deeper subconscious level aren't as literal as we believe them to be, and their meaning is far more powerful and far more empowering when you see the play of meaning.
Exactly, and that's why now I'm feeling a different layer to that. And we are talking about this. We are talking about this because if you are listening to this conversation, please do the same. Reflect. be with your left and right and whatever, but then be with yourself there. You go through this exploration of energy yourself. because now, as I mentioned the left and the right hand conversation, then for me, my right hand is the giving hand.
Yes.
My left hand is a taking, receiving hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm feeling, we can be very guilty by giving, but not putting our hands up and receiving, and it goes into the whole abundance conversation. So that's a different layer, layer too. Because now as I'm holding my left hand, it's turning from the top to the like palm up. That would be my receiving hand. And even when I'm doing readings, when I'm working with somebody, Spirit is showing me, the energy is showing me direction, different directions, different energy with the individual whose energy I'm working with.
Yeah.
By me using my two hands and the direction and the energy of the shape and then of all the gestures, everything of the hands. So that has a different feel to it, because then mind, we are sidetracking.
Yeah, I mean.
So going back to the hands, so practical tips.
Yeah. So another one would be, how do you stop yourself from getting lost in your imagination, for instance, or if something, some memory arises that you suddenly find yourself to being uncomfortable with. One really important thing as a hypnotherapist is understanding adverse events. So someone can have an adverse psychological event linked to early childhood trauma they know nothing about, and during the hypnotic session can express that in a number of ways, from just outright tears to screaming to a loss of comprehension of where they are. And so there's kind of 6 words that we would use in order to help that person to settle back and then deal with the memory when it's good for them to deal with. So there's always a risk when we're doing exploratory work in our own psyche that something like that can appear. So the technique would be, so I'm using the direct experience of my hand to look for, I'm going from conceptual to raw to direct experiencing. And what if something comes up that I can't deal with? And this is where the most natural thing of all comes in, which is just to follow the breath. And so whilst you're doing this, be conscious of the breath, recognize that as the breath comes to an end, when you're breathing in, there's a pause. And when it pauses, the mind stops. You breathe out, and at the bottom of that expiration, there's a pause and the mind stops. So it's a really good way of getting more clarity of thoughts, seeing them earlier rather than seeing them when you're halfway through the spiral of thoughts, whilst exploring these 3 different levels of experience, from concept to raw and to direct. And the more direct the experience, the more you realize that there really isn't any separation, that there isn't a hand, there isn't an object, there isn't a subject, there's just this. And this is free, and it's perfect, it's complete, it's whole, it's always whole. There's not much we can really say. Well, there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of words that we could say about it, but none of them are it, and none of them really can ever make sense of it, because that's just an overlay of a mind on what is already a direct experience of perfection and wholeness.
It's quite fascinating, because if I go back to the beginning, we started the time travel, the journey, and our or even addiction to be there in the space somewhere else in the historically in time, whether we are there or not, it's another question, but then we want to be somewhere else to find the answer, and now we are bringing ourselves back to this moment. And then knowing that everything is available in this very moment.
It is. I mean, where else could it be? Outside of this moment, we have imagination, and imagination appears in this moment. So there's nowhere else for it to be. There's nothing that is outside of experience. But I think that at the core, when we really get really deep inside and look at the psychological self, if you like, what's actually happening is there is a repulsion and an attraction mechanism, if you like. Many spiritual teachers will talk about the seeking impulse, and that creates separation. And I know there's quite a few that talk about this point of early childhood where there's kind of a contraction in the body that leads to a tension that's never known from that point on. Like Rupert Spira talks about it as a clenched fist that you don't know is clenched. And, when that clenching, when that tension lets go, it's suddenly realised that you never knew you were tense. It's like, what just happened? And we can go through periods where we release that, and it's not anything that we're doing ever. That's released, and then over time it tenses back up again.
Yes.
But the more it happens, the more you realise it's happening, and the easier it is to actually let go of it. I was just coming back to this sense of repulsion and attraction.
I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. So for me, this is where this kind of binary experience really begins, like a dual experience, zeros and ones, this and that, here and there, up and down, hot and cold, Well, we've already established that words have no intrinsic meaning or value. We give them those, and we're given them first, then we take them on, and we drop certain meanings and we take on new meanings. But what are we doing to recognize the non-binary or the non-dual nature of our reality? Because that's really where my focus is with people. It's to say, look, let's have a really deep look at what you're trying to avoid right now, or what you're seeking to improve in your experience right now. Because if we can look at those two things, we can identify what you're avoiding, which is some feeling in the body. There'll be something in the body that doesn't want to be seen, and so you'll be avoiding that. And that will be some experience of a lifetime, in this lifetime, another, whatever. There'll be some experience that is trapped inside what we would call the physical body, although it's energy. But there is a stagnation or a block or a limitation in the energetic body that says, don't see me because this is too painful. And then often what happens is there's a draw or a pull or a leaning into, Josh Putnam talks about this, a leaning into an experience. So that is, and that can be in its grossest form, that's addiction. That's, and it goes on. Not only it becomes addiction, it becomes psychopathy, it becomes narcissism. Depression, yeah. And all of it, when we see it from whatever angle, however we see it, there is a recognition that we're talking about a comfort zone, even as painful as it can get. And from my own perspective, having been depressed, having been an addict, having been suicidal, there's a point at which, and this is the blessing, the grace of all life, where it's seen. Something about the experience is seen to be untrue. It's seen that you're trying to avoid something, or it's seen that you're trying to gain something. And neither of those two things can actually happen. They only ever happen in the mind. We're born naked of thought, and when we die, whatever thought is left will go on and wish to inhabit and express itself in some other form. So the idea of past lives and future lives is really all about thoughts, and in Buddhism that's very clear, that the only thing that ever incarnates is the thought patterns and those things that haven't been expressed fully in that lifetime. The soul, of course, is eternal and immortal, so it's not incarnating. That's a never-ending expression in its own right. But thoughts and patterns of thoughts and behaviours that haven't been expressed or worked out, they'll continue until they've been expressed or worked out. How do we change those when they appear? Well, we did a little experiment, didn't we, the other day, which was, okay, so if in this moment you feel a certain way, limited, restricted, or something like that, has there been a time in your life when you didn't feel that way, where you felt expanded and conscious and joyous and, you felt really good? Well, if you remember that, your emotional body, your physical sensing will start to change to align with that. And then you bring it forward into this moment, and that's you've just manifested your next moment.
I just, that gives me actually an idea because like a couple of minutes here, continuing talking, but then would you be willing to do some like a meditation for us, like a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah,
as
why
we
not?
are talking.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to you will just bring me back. And then if you are listening, this conversation, my lovely listener, then join us. Join in.
Of course. Okay, so
a couple of minutes.
Yeah. if we just take a moment to just notice the body, notice very quickly if there's any tension in it. Take a breath. Doesn't have to be a deep breath. Whatever you feel. Just when you let that breath go, just notice how the muscles can relax, and how you can actually begin to let go of tension, let go of thoughts. Just take a moment for yourself, totally, to relax. Notice also as you are breathing out that you can relax deeper, that there have been many times in your life when you've been beautifully and wonderfully, deeply relaxed before, and that you can have a sudden feeling of that. You can link those together. And it's like with the next breath you breathe out, it's like a domino falling on multiple moments of relaxation. So just letting yourself go, so that the dominoes, as the dominoes of thought, the dominoes of relaxation fall, they fall continuously. And it doesn't matter that you'll never find the last one falling, because you'll always get more deeply relaxed. Just taking a moment, again, for yourself. As those dominoes fall, perhaps you can follow them in your mind, kind of the winding track of dominoes, however they appear to you, as each one connects with the next one, falling and falling in an infinite loop of falling. And that these thoughts, these worries, these concerns, these problems, whatever they are, they're just falling over. You're letting go of them. And that's not you doing anything. It's not you undoing anything. It's just happening naturally on its own. It's an innocent expression of life. It's an innocent expression of a loving, infinite, eternal being, a presence and a knowing that you find in this moment right now. Not because you want to, not because there's a choice, not because there's a decision to do so, but because that's how it seems to happen. Now you can follow these dominoes anywhere, certainly following them back to a place or a time when you felt strong, when you felt empowered, when you felt full of life, or you just simply felt good. Whether it was happiness, joy, simplicity, deep relaxation, wisdom, love, whatever it is. And you'll land somewhere in one of these dominoes where you'll suddenly feel as if you remembered something so powerful that you can't even believe you'd forgotten it. And when you're ready, you can begin to imagine that feeling, whatever it is, this really positive, joyous, wonderful, empowering feeling. You'll begin to feel that kind of growing from behind the navel, or just around the navel area, like a light, for instance, or a sensation of light. Sometimes it's like a liquid white light growing out from that area, brighter and more powerful, warm and safe and secure. And that can grow and grow until it fills the whole body. It might take a little while to do it, and it'll certainly continue doing it as we continue to record, and perhaps throughout the day. But just allow that feeling from somewhere deep in your knowledge, deep in the record of you, of this sense of power and wisdom and love and infinite eternal presence. Let it grow. Let it fill every muscle, every fiber, every cell. Let it fill the space between the molecules of you. As it begins to fill these spaces, these ideas and concepts of cells and of molecules and of atoms and of neutrons and of protons, begin to notice as you breathe in, it begins to feel like your energy is lifting. With each breath in, you begin to feel more alive, more awake, more present, more empowered. So that in a moment, I'm going to count from 3 to 1. And when I get to 1, I'm going to make a noise with my fingers, and you'll be fully present back in the room, back in your chair or wherever you are, back to being fully and completely aware of yourself. So 3, feeling that energy build now, enjoying the sense of it. 2, maybe even feeling the need to move, to stretch. 1, really feeling as if you're fully present, alive, back in the room. There we go. How was that? That was a trip down memory lane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely more of a hypnotic meditation, but hopefully that invoked some pleasant memories for you.
Yeah, it's like for me it was like a journey.
Yes.
At the very beginning, when I don't know what you said, because I was like I'm physically in a space.
Right. Yeah.
And I was on the top of the mountain, and when you talked about the dominoes,
Yeah.
I was feeling the mud underneath my feet.
Right.
The mud. And then I was sliding down on the mountain, but I was still hanging on to things while I'm looking over this beautiful horizon, as if I was in the rainforest, because it felt very humid.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was thinking, oh, I don't normally go in a meditation to a rainforest. So like in itself, it was quite interesting. But the next, when you said that, imagine when you are in a most altogether place, then I know where I was. I was in a hall, and I was doing what I was doing there. Yeah. And then the end was I was back in this. I was actually in the rainforest, not just seeing it from above, from the top of the mountain, because I was sliding into that. But then I was in the middle of the rainforest, not as if I have ever been there. But then I was seeing and hearing, and it was all very alive, and it was there to explore. It was like an adventurous playground, and I didn't know which direction to go immediately, because there was so much there to the novelty of it. And then it's like really feeding all my senses, because I was hearing the birds, the constant sounds of the birds, different parrots and all those birds and animals, and the water cascading, and then the scent, and then feeling the humidity of. And it's very lush in colours. So that is where I went.
I mean, isn't it? It really is powerful. Just a few moments where we just relax and take time, which is very difficult in this busy life that we have. It's very difficult until we make it a priority. When we make it a priority to sit and just spend a little bit of time, whether it is journeying in our imagination and really being there. The mind really doesn't know the distinction between its own creation and the reality that it's in, and that's one of the tools that hypnotherapy's it really builds on that experience, knowing that if you can actually lead somebody into a very focused expression of their own imaginative power, then they can really change. Not just a little bit of change, but really change. Yes. Massive transformational change. And from my own kind of progression, moving away from hypnotherapy, because as you would say, spirit led me to look at energy work in a more profound way. And that's where I certainly 2015, where I moved into doing more, having had Kundalini awakenings, way back in 2006, realizing that there was an intelligence at work that I was becoming very conscious of. Very conscious, not as in the sense of guides and of having, moments of being shown, but it was just, I was directly aware that I was hearing a voice in my own voice for the first time. And I was just as shocked at the words that were coming out of my mouth as the person sat in the chair that I was working with. And then really surrendering to that, really just saying, well, I don't know what this is, but it's clearly incredible. It's mysterious. I'm so curious as to what this means. And then giving into it, and just recognizing now that that's part of who I am. I have no clue what words are going to come out of the mouth.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if they feel personal or impersonal. It's all the same expression of life. There's no distinction in there. It's easy to say I can discriminate between the ideas that make me Paul and the ideas that prove I'm not Paul, but that's all the same happening. It's all the same life. So that discrimination is just a thought process. Again, it's just imagination. And there's a lot of freedom in that, because there's no point it's absolutely futile to even be worried about what thoughts arise, and what patterns and what habits, and it's really a completely futile pursuit, simply because everything arises innocently, effortlessly, choicelessly, and as much as I'm the witness of it, I am it, and there's no distinction from it. So imagination, reality, all of it is the same experiencing. And I would kind of suggest to anyone that, and certainly the listeners, that experience is far more worth the investigation than the content of experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just knowing that there is a power to imagine in that way, or in any way, it is the same experience everyone's having. We're all having experience. The content is what changes, and that will never stop.
Yes, yes.
That's the one guaranteed reality that we have. The content of experience is absolutely dynamic and full and alive all the time. And how we approach that from a thinking sense is what makes us happy, liberated, suffering, depressed. That's where life comes in, at the dual level, at the level of mind.
Yes, what label we give
exactly
to the experience, and then that is where we can actually slide.
Yes.
Slide, and then spend years or even our whole lifetime by being in that reality.
Yes, yeah.
I feel what is really fascinating. We live in a very peculiar time, but then also a very, very, how nearly said flamboyant time. I don't know what I'm saying, flamboyant, but then not very creative, or like anything can happen with our soul. So that is like we just need to turn up for the experience. We need to be there, and then so that opportunity to shift, and then be bold to go to the space of exploration.
Yes.
I feel that's a big keyword here, a big shift for anybody.
Yeah.
Because once you have gotten that, actually, I'm just curious how it would have me, or what would show up for me, then we are already on the right path with that.
I mean, as you will know, if you spend time looking or inquiring into the qualities of experience, if you look at that, there is a natural curiosity that arises that is very childlike and very innocent. And it's far more engaging than looking at the weather or looking at the dust on the shelf, or thinking about the next thing that's coming up, because those things, those thoughts and those experiences, they're always going to be there. But actually starting to notice that there is a quality of experience that we're overlooking, which is effectively the very presence of being, the knowingness of life, complete, whole and perfect, already here. Just fully arrived, fully loaded, all the information. It's like, how do we even know what a word means? How do we even know what the senses are? Where do we get that intelligence to be able to communicate anything or experience anything? Where does that come from?
Yes.
And there can be a very visceral experience of that. The more we look at the nature of experience itself rather than the content of it.
Fascinating. It's always fascinating. Fascinating. Yes. So I tell you what, just one more thing, because I know we will have a lot of fascinating conversations coming up. Where can people find you? Because I know you are preparing for something this summer coming up.
Yes.
Maybe we can talk about that for a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So
then more later, another time.
Last year, I helped out at a well-being retreat, which was led by a really good friend, Nicola Stead. And Nick she'd been living in New Zealand for some time and working, and she'd done some work over there with, I think it's like Steiner schools. She'd done some work with a little boy that was in a really bad way. He was, it was screaming, no real verbal communication. I think even to the level of like smearing his own feces on the walls and things like this.
Yes.
And she spent a lot of time just being present with him, and over the time that she worked with him, and she knows the story better than I, but they started to notice changes just by being there. And in New Zealand, they have this word called mana, which when you look at it, it really comes back for the Polynesians. It's a sense of a hidden power within.
Mana. I love that word, mana.
Yeah, mana is beautiful. When you look at it, and if you have an awareness of the other systems around the world, so mine really started with Kriya Yoga and the raising of Kundalini back in the early 2000s. And then there's the Qigong aspect and the lightning path of esoteric yoga, Heaven's Way Qigong. Then there's the internal alchemy of Taoism from sort of 5,000 years ago. All of these systems point to this one thing, that there is an intelligent, knowing, present energy that is working through us all. So yeah, I mean, we're in this phase of what we'd agree is a great awakening. And I mean, that really means we're in a very short period, a very short time period within which this conscious experience is evolving. So it's rapidly evolving through individuals, as it appears. People are going through spontaneous, what we would call Kundalini awakenings. Well, this whole idea, whether it's Kundalini, Chi, Ki, or Mana, we've taken it to heart to mean this word Mana, this hidden energy, this, if you like, hidden intelligence at work. And if you get the opportunity to talk with Nick, she'll be able to tell you about her experience, her direct experience of that, and how she came to effectively begin Mana retreats and the events under the Mana. Well, it's now an institute. We've created an institute, and at the moment, Nick and I are the trustees for that. So this year, she's going to be running there'll be a ladies' retreat, so a women-only retreat near Whitby. It was a beautiful place near Whitby, where you can see the Abbey and the sea, and it's amazing. So that's the 21st, I think. It's the third weekend of June for that. Okay. Only for a very small number of ladies. So I think it's going to be about 27 women, because there's 3 facilitators. So the top number is 30 people. And then I'll be running a retreat the last weekend of June with Jason, Jake, and Terry, another friend who hopefully you'll be able to get a podcast with Terry. We're going to be running the men's only retreat during that phase. So Jason is more of a shaman. He's doing a lot of sound healing. We'll be doing a DMT release workshop. So to really point out for individuals how to access our own deeper imaginative powers. Most of my work will be focused on the Taoist energy practices, which is a very masculine-based energy work. It is to actually use viscerally the energy that's around us to evoke mana, to evoke this sense of Kundalini, of evolution, and then have a visceral experience of it. And that's very much about using the emotion and the through psychosomatic practices to actually get that energy alive and moving in the body. Becoming aware of it, knowing it, being able to tap into it, being able to release happy endorphins. So there's a lot of really good content-free work involved there. So you can get rid of trauma and old stuff without having to relive it. It's as far away from like CBT as there ever could be. We don't have to do the verbal talking of it or listening to it. It's really, really content-free. So that'll be the focus there. Terry's just started out as a coach. His life story is amazing, coming back from basically a horrific accident where he was blind in one eye, deaf. He still is deaf in one ear, broken spine, unable to walk. It's an incredible story where he is now in a really different place. Really different. He understands his energy body. He's fought back through, terrible injury and depression. to get his physical body into a shape now that they never said it was possible.
Wow.
And I know that because I was told in my early 20s that I'd be hooked over with this horrific kind of bent up spine by the time I'm 60. And, you know, my next big birthday is 60 and I'm still going strong. And I certainly don't have this bent over thing that they said.
Yes.
So, yeah, the Manna Institute, 2 retreats this year. As I said, 3rd weekend of June for the ladies, last weekend of June for the men. And we're really focusing from the guy side, we're really focusing on what it is to be a man, to understand our divine qualities, and then how to really hold space in this reality, because men, you know, we are effectively, when we are fully balanced, we're able to become the holding space for women to get through their trauma. Because there's very few people around that aren't living with trauma or needing healing. And our retreats, really, they're not looking so much to say, oh, this is a healing retreat. It's very much healing from healing. It's saying, let's put an end to the need for healing. Let's recognize what the physical body needs, the psychological body needs, and what the energetic body needs, and bring them together. So harmonize through alchemy, understanding what repulsions and attractions are going on at the deep level, and then being conscious, because once we're conscious of them, the moment we see something we haven't been seeing, that's healing. You know, that's it. So that's what we're looking forward to. End of June, a nice sunny weekend, we hope.
Yes.
We're going to use a little bit of music. We're going to have saunas. We've got a guy coming to put some saunas in for us on the Saturday night. So we're going to be able to just kick back and actually force some of those toxins out of the body.
Yes.
And I'm going to bring along some of these little Japanese baths, the pop-up baths, and then we'll do some ice bath work as well. So and we'll have a bit of music. There's going to be quite a lot going on.
Beautiful. It sounds fascinating already. Yeah. So if anybody is interested in this, attending, how can they be in touch? What can they find? And then also, how do you spell the word mana?
It's simply M-A-N-A.
M-A-N-A.
That's it, yeah. If I can, we have a...
So it's fascinating because then you've got 1 week for the ladies, 27 weekend. Apologies, that's 20. You said that 27 places available, and then the next one is. So we can expect some shift, if I say that shift by the end of June. Very small community of the human beings that can go through something extraordinary, really. Probably like coming with open mind and open heart to this.
In terms of contacting, we have mannampwr.org, and there's a retreats page on there, and people can sign up to the retreats. They will also be able to find Manna, and again, it's MPWR, Manna, MPWR on Facebook.
MPWR.
That's it, yeah. They can find that on Facebook as well. Or they can contact me, which is non-dualreality@proton.me. So that's non-dualreality@proton.me.
That's a nice handful one. Mouthful one. Non-dual
reality.
dot
at proton.me.
At proton.mail.
Me.
Me.
Oh, right, let me do that one again.
You go.
Non-dualreality@proton.me. Okay.
Right, we got it. We got it.
Thank you.
Here we go. So, something very extraordinary to look forward to. Now, I tell you what, this has been another fascinating conversation of ours, of many, and as we said, after a few years now, we got to the point that we actually sit down and start sharing it with you, because I always feel when this energy works, when the energy works, then if it resonates with one person out there, then it made sense. And that is why we are really here to shift the energy, and then help each other.
Yeah, I mean, For me, it's really coming back, really looking for what's working at the start. So in the middle of any conversation, we're not at the start. We're not at the start of the meaning of the words. We're not at the start of the meaning of ourselves. We're some way down the line. So it's looking, and the inquiry is to go, well, what is the start? What is sponsoring the conversation? What is sponsoring my feelings and emotions? Where is that coming from? Is that what we would consider to be a cult? Is it hidden? Is it hidden somewhere in the body, and we're rejecting that, and so we're talking about it with the idea that we can do something with it? And when we really boil it down, we've got attraction and repulsion, which is masculine and feminine, yin and yang, duality. If we like to look at the yin and yang side, yang being hot, the heat of the male, and yin being the cold of the female, which is in some ways an inversion, because the female is beauty and the male is truth. And beauty expresses itself in any way it wishes to express itself. And truth is always seeking to understand beauty. And so when those two things come together, that beauty recognizes that truth is beautiful, and truth recognizes that all things have beauty in them, then we have what we would consider to be yoga. We have the union of yin and yang, positive, negative, repulsion and attraction. And that kind of collapse of that story leaves us to live presently, directly in this moment, and use imagination rather than being used by imagination.
Wow. There was another amazing conversation of ours here with my guest, with my special guest, Paul. And I have a feeling it's not the first time we are listening, or you are joining us here and then sharing about your insights or revelations, and even as you said, maybe creating something together with your friends who are creating, and we could do something like an open table conversation, or like a big discussion, something, it's like endless possibilities here. Yeah. So here we go. So thank you very much.
You're welcome
for being my guest.
Fun. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
this was probably episode 1, and then we were sitting here drinking coffees in episode 21 or something like that.
Yeah.
But then here we go. So thank you very much, and looking forward to having you back onto this podcast, which is called Let's Talk Spirit, with your show host Zsuzsanna Medium. And then if you enjoy this conversation, I would love you to be back. Feel free to find all the other conversations, our recordings, and it's always about our life, not just the spiritual. It's also well-being, the mental, the physical, emotional, spiritual well-being, and how we are manipulating, or how we are allowing the energy to work, and eventually we are living a happier life, more truth to our soul mission. So here we go, my lovely listener. Thank you very much for being here. And again, this was Let's Talk with Spirit. Let's Talk with Spirit. And Let's Talk Spirit. Let's Talk Spirit. I'm forgetting my title. Here we go. Let's Talk Spirit with your show host, Zsuzsanna Medium. If you are interested in my work, you can find me on www.zsuzannamedium.com. And Zsuzsanna is always spelled as ZSUZSANNA, medium.com. Or you can find it as ZSUZSANNA, medium.com. And then here we go. After another fascinating conversation, we are sending you loads of love, many, many blessings, and have a beautiful day. And then also one more thing, if you are interested, or if you have anything coming up after this show, feel free to find us. You can find the contact details of Paul and that gang over there. Or if you would like to send an email or a message to me, feel free to use hello@zsuzannamedium.com, and I would love to include you maybe in the next show. Or if you have, as I always say, a fascinating conversation, a life story, something happened to you and then really shifted your perception of your life, please be in touch, because I would love to hear from you as well. So here we go, my lovely listener. Thank you very much for being here. This was Let's Talk Spirit with your show host Zsuzsanna Medium. And until the next time, we are sending you lots of love, many, many blessings. And here we go. Have a beautiful day. Thank you. Bye.